This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. We were discussing in clinical research, the drug development part, where had, we finished the drug discovery, then the preclinical studies, animal toxicity studies, where we also discussed the acute and chronic toxicity study, subacute toxicity study, then the reproductive toxicity study, then AIMS test, genotoxicity, carcinogenicity. So all those studies in either animals or in vitro in microorganisms. So the preclinical studies, once the preclinical study is done, once all the data is collected, then the sponsor of the study, like for any clinical research, there will be certain stakeholders, certain clinical trial professionals. So there will be the sponsor. Most of the time, the sponsor would be the drug manufacturing company, uh, or it can be any institution, or maybe sometimes, very rarely, some person, individual person can be the sponsor of the study. Uh, so the sponsor has to submit an investigational new drug application to the regulatory authority. I hope you remember what is the regulatory authority. In any nation, in any country, uh, there will be authorities who will regulate, who will set guidelines on how to conduct the clinical trials, on how to import drugs, export drugs. All the rules and regulations will be set by the regulatory authorities. So every country will be having a regulatory authority. So the sponsor will be collecting all, like the sponsor who is one responsible person who supports even financially the clinical trial, and the sponsor, once the preclinical studies and the drug discovery part, all those is over, the sponsor has to collect all this data and submit to the investigational new drug application to the regulatory authority, IND application. It is called as investigational new drug application. So it is the responsibility of the sponsor uh, to submit all the data, all the preclinical data to the regulatory authority, so that he can initiate, he can move forward with a particular new chemical entity to be used in human beings. So to start the clinical research. So far we are done with the preclinical part, all the in vitro, in vivo study and in vivo studies in animals. Once that part is done, and once that drug has been proven uh, to be used in human beings, once they understood that this particular new chemical entity can be safely tried in human beings, then and once the study is over, the sponsor has to submit this to the regulatory authority. And why he has to submit because he wants to continue the new chemical entity to be used in human beings. So he will, in order to get the approval from the regulatory authority, the sponsor has to submit this investigational new drug application. So today we will discuss what all things has to be present in an investigational new drug application. So investigational new drug application is submitted to the regulatory authority for approval or disapproval. When the sponsor submit the IND application, the investigational new drug application should contain a cover sheet. Cover sheet. Cover sheet should have all the contact details, name, address, telephone number, then date of application, and name of the investigation new drug or the new chemical entity's name. So the IND application should contain a cover sheet, and this cover sheet should have all the details such as name, the sponsor's name, address, telephone number, then date of the application, and name of the investigation new drug or the new chemical entity. Then this IND application, investigation new drug application, has to be submitted before each phase. So now the sponsor and his team is going to start clinical trial, or they are going to try this new chemical entity into human beings. So this clinical trial has got 4 phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. So before each phase, the sponsor has to submit the investigational IND application. So in cover sheet, he has to mention which phase. This is for which phase. This particular IND application is for which phase. So if it is for the phase 1, he has to mention that. So here, like first, the cover sheet should contain name, address, telephone number, and all such details, all the contact details, name of the investigation product. Then next, it should contain the phase, which phase the clinical investigation is going to be conducted. Then, there should be 3 commitments in the cover page. The sponsor has to agree that he will comply with all the rules and regulations that is set by the regulatory authority for proper conduct of the trial. So a commitment that he will adhere to the all the regulatory requirements. The regulatory authority has set certain guidelines and has said that there should be all these requirements so that you can do a particular clinical trial. So first the sponsor has to mention that he will comply with all the rules or all the requirements that is made by the regulatory authority for smooth conduct of the study. So first commitment is that. Then he also need to commit that the uh, clinical investigation will not begin until the sponsor receives uh, he will not begin the clinical investigation until the approval by the FDA is being received. Then third commitment is that he will not uh, the sponsor has to ensure that there will be an investigational review board, IRB, or institutional ethics committee, institutional review board, or institutional ethics committee. So this is another major thing that is major part of clinical research, the institutional review board or institutional ethics committee. So for any organization that is conducting any research, or if any person or any organization wants to conduct a research, they have to submit the study plan or protocol to an institutional review board. So institutional review board is a board that have that is formed by people of uh, different backgrounds, such as like it is mandatory that an IRB, institutional review board or institutional ethics committee, must have people like a pharmacologist, then specific doctors, then a lawyer, then a social worker. So there is a forum that the people from different backgrounds should be present, and they should form a committee, and whoever is going to do a research must ensure that their research will be monitored and reviewed by one of such organization. So that is the function of institutional review board or institutional ethics committee. So as you study further, as we go move on to further topics, you'll be coming to know more information regarding different professionals involved in the study. So there is a sponsor, then there is an investigator, then there are other clinical research coordinators, monitors. So many professionals are involved, so many stakeholders, so many clinical trial professionals are there. And like for smooth, like in order to get approval from the regulatory authority, the sponsor and also even the investigator has to ensure that the particular study they are going to do will be continuously monitored and reviewed by a board. So this board can be this board is called as Institutional Review Board or Institutional Ethics Committee, and the main function of this committee is that the particular study is done ethically. That like we know, clinical trial involves uh, volunteers, volunteers who are either patients or healthy volunteers, and they will be recruited, and our new chemical entity will be tried on them, will be given to them. So this committee ensures that the rights and dignity of the participants, the human volunteers or patient volunteers who are involved in the study, their rights and dignity are preserved or they are not exploited. The main intention of the Institutional Review Board or Institutional Ethics Committee is that when any organization or any manufacturing unit or any sponsor, when they are doing a study, the human participants involved in the study are protected. Their rights, well-being, and dignity is protected. They are not exploited. So that is the main objective uh, uh, behind this Institutional Review Board or Institutional Ethics Committee. And regulatory authority only approves a study that is being reviewed, constantly being reviewed by an Institutional Review Board or Institutional Ethics Committee. So the sponsor has to get approval or get consent from an Institutional Review Board or Institutional Ethics Committee, even when he is submitting. This is a very early stage. So even at this stage also, the sponsor has to submit to the regulatory authority that they are in contact with any one of the institutional review board or institutional ethics committee who is going to monitor or review the study throughout. So the sponsor has to have an IRB or IEC, Institutional Ethics Committee or Institutional Review Board. So Institutional Ethics Committee or Institutional Review Board, even like in big hospitals and all, they have their own IRB and IEC. So whoever is going to do a study in that, like IRB or IEC even monitors whatever study that is being conducted in that particular hospital. And but like we may think that because the study is done in their own hospital, sometimes they will be biased, like for their own personal gain or personal profit, they are going to approve all the study. The individual institutional review or institutional review board ethics committee is going to approve all the study that is being done in the hospital. But it is not true, because this particular committee has got people from outside also who is not part of the study, who is independent of or it not related to any part of the hospital. So the IRV or IEC in any hospital is an independent organization. Even if they are in that particular hospital, to approve or disapprove the studies, researches going on in that hospital, they are independent. They cannot be, their opinions are not biased. So that is why it is mandatory that the regulatory authority has set this rule that whoever is going to do the study, they must have an IRB or IEC, or even if they don't have their own IRB or IEC, the particular sponsor has to register with any other outside IRB or IEC. Uh, then only they can move forward with the study. So three commitments. One is so we are like in the cover sheet, there should be the contact details. Then there should be like they have to mention which study, which phase this particular IND is submitted for. Then they have to also show three commitments. One is that the sponsor has to ensure that the particular study will be conducted in accordance with the guidelines set by the regulatory authority. Then next is that the sponsor has to also ensure that the particular regulatory approval, uh, they will wait for the regulatory approval, then only they'll start the study. Then third one is that the sponsor has to ensure an IRB or IEC, Institutional Review Board or Institutional Ethics Committee is involved, and they like and the study will be continuously monitored and reviewed by this particular IRB or IEC. So these three commitments should be there in the cover page. Then there should be like for any clinical trial there should be a monitor. So the name and title of the person who is responsible for monitoring the conduct and progress of the clinical trial. So this person's name also should be present in the cover page. So name and title of the person who is responsible for monitoring the conduct and progress of the clinical investigation. So that should be present. Then in certain studies, we have contract contract research organization. So um, these are companies like Equia. Uh, so these are companies that is delegated by the sponsor. The sponsor will hand over few of the responsibilities to some other companies. So if such a party is involved, their contact details has to be mentioned in the cover page. So if sponsor is transferring any of his obligations or duty to contract research organization, then in the cover page, the sponsor has to mention that he has delegated few of his duty to this particular organization, which is called as contract research organization, and and list of all the functions that will be done by this contract research organization has to be present in the cover page. Then the sponsor has to sign. Then whoever if the sponsor is not there, then sponsor's authorized representative can sign the cover page. So the sponsor can sign, and if sponsor is not available, sponsor's legal representative can, whoever the authorized representative for the sponsor can sign on the cover page. So that is with the cover page. This is the content of the cover page. So in the IND application, there should be a cover page, and the cover page should contain all these parts. One is there should be name and address and contact details of the sponsor, which phase, then three commitments. One is the particular study will be done according with the regulatory guidelines set by the regulatory authorities. Then there will be an IRB or IEC. Then the study will start only once the approval is received. Then if this if any person is involved in monitoring the trial, then that person's name and contact details, his designation or title. Then if the sponsor has transferred any of his duty to a contract research organization, the details of the name of the CRO, contract research organization, and also what all responsibility would be done by them. So that information should be present. Then the sponsor has to sign on the cover page, and if the sponsor is not there, like any other authorized representative sponsor can sign. Okay. So that is cover sheet. Next is table of content. Now, what all has to be present in the table of content? So, in the table of content, there should be an introductory statement and investigational plan. So, in introductory statement, there should be like some of the objectives. What are the what are the objectives of the particular study they are going to do? Then, what is the duration for which the study will be done? Then, so these as introductory statement, there should be some um, objectives and the duration. Then next there should be if the particular new chemical entity has been tried in any other country before, like any human study details data are available, then that information can be included. So a summary of previous human experience uh, can be included in the study. Then if the drug particular new chemical entity is was marketed in some other country and it was withdrawn, then why the drug has been withdrawn from that particular country, the reason for the reason why the particular drug has been banned in the other country, so that reason has to be included. Then so these are the some of the introductory statement introductory statement and investigation in these we have to mention the objectives, plan, duration, then summary of any previous human experience. Then if the drug is withdrawn from the if the drug is withdrawn from the market in any other country, why it is withdrawn, the reason why the particular drug is banned, that has to be included in the introductory part of the in, uh, in the first part of the table of content. Next, the IND also should include investigators brochure. So investigators brochure is one important document that is in clinical trials. So this particular document, which is called as investigators brochure, is given to the investigator by the sponsor. So when the sponsor is the person who selects the investigator. So, as the investigator is selected for the clinical trial, investigator would be preferably a physician most of the time. So, when the investigator is selected, the sponsor has to give all the information regarding the drug in a file, which is called as investigator's brochure. So, in this investigator's brochure, there should be brief description of the new chemical entity, the particular drug, then the summary of pharmacological and toxicological effect of the drug, and if to any extent the information in humans is available, then that also has to be given. Then the safety, if safety and like pharmacokinetic, then safety, efficacy, if such information is available, it has to be involved. Then also the description, any description of any risk and side effects associated that is anticipated in the study based upon the animal data. So briefly, this much things should be present in the investigator's brochure. So investigator's brochure is a document, very important document in a clinical trial. This particular document is given by the sponsor to the investigator who is going to be leading the study. So it is the responsibility of the sponsor to update this investigator's brochure. The sponsor has to, like whenever new information is available regarding the particular new chemical entity, it is the responsibility of the sponsor to update it periodically. And it has to be updated in the investigator's brochure. Investigator's brochure should contain brief description of the drug substance, like how it is formulated, structural formula, and also the summary of pharmacological and toxicological effect of the drug. Then, like any summary or information regarding its use in human beings, if available, then that also should be included. Then, description of possible risk and side effects. Then, like any other information, any other precaution that has to be taken when the drug is to be used in human beings, all the potential side effects that was seen in animal studies, all those has to be included in the investigator's brochure. So the sponsor will hand it over the investigation brochure to the investigator. So when the sponsor submit the IND application, he has to include this investigator's brochure also along with other documents. And another thing that has to be submitted to the regulatory authorities along with this IND application is the protocol of the study. So protocol also is a very important document in clinical trials. So investigators brochures is there, which is an important document. Similarly, protocol is also an important document. So protocol has to be prepared um, in such a way that the protocol should contain all the details, the like how it is planned in phase one. So clinical trial is done in 4 phases. So what are the plans? What are the objectives of each phases? And like when they prepare the protocol for phase one, it should be less detailed and more flexible. Then in phase two and phase three, there should be like objective in each phase. What objectives has to be met? For example, like in phase one, we have to have a dosing plan, including like duration, dose, or what are the methods to um, determine the particular dose, effective dose. Then, like how the inclusion criteria is made, like how the human beings are recruited. So we cannot include every human being. There are certain conditions, like maybe like if the study population is, if the study has to be done in pediatric population, we will limit the age to maybe 18. So inclusion criteria, how the inclusion and exclusion criteria is set, all those information has to be done in phase one. So in phase two, maybe healthy volunteers are involved. So in healthy volunteers also, what age group they should be. All such things has to be involved. Has to be explained. Then to identify the efficacy or to monitor the toxicity, what all things has to be monitored. For example, blood test, vital signs. So all these, which all aspects has to be monitored. All these two things should be present in the protocol. So this protocol for phase one, phase two, and phase three, all three protocol has to be submitted along with the in IND application. Then as the study progresses, maybe in between, like after phase one, something new they have identified. So they can even the design of the study can be altered. So all if any protocol amendment is made, any alteration is made, then it has to be submitted to the IRB first, Institution Ethics Committee first, and they have to approve it, and then it has to be updated with the regulatory authority even. So protocol amendment also has to be approved by the IRBIC and even updated with the regulatory authority later. Then in the protocol, again, all the name, address, and qualification of the investigators involved. Then any other sub-investigator, if there, then their name has to be involved. Then which IRBIC, Institutional Review Board, their address and facilities has to be included. So the protocol has to contain all these information as well, such as name, address, and qualifications of the investigator, then sub-investigator, then which IRB or IEC is reviewing the study. So the name and address of the IRB or IEC who is reviewing the study, then which research facility is used, like which hospital is used or which clinic is used. So the name and address of the research facility they are going to use. Then on what basis the patient is selected. Then description of the design of the study. For like we have heard the design of the study means whether like there are different designs. One design that may be familiar with you is single blind, double blind, etc. So which design is being used? Then what has to be the observations and measurements has to be done so that the study objectives are fulfilled. Then what are the procedures that will be done on the patients? So all these has to be included in the protocol. So these are the general things that has to be included in the protocol. So protocol should contain objective and purpose, name and address of the investigator, sub-investigator, then IRB/IEC name and address, then research facility that would be used, then also like criteria for patient selection, the inclusion and exclusion criteria, then like what observations and measurements has to be made to fulfill the objectives, then any procedure would be that would be done on the patients. So all these has to be included in the protocol. So that is there. Then next information that should be present in the IND application is chemistry and manufacturing information. So chemistry and manufacturing information of the new chemical entity. What is the content, like what is the structural formula, which class, then how it is manufactured. So in case of the manufacturing information, like maybe initially this particular new chemical entity has to be prepared in a small scale, and before they move on to the human studies, they should find like methods to prepare the particular new chemical entity in large scale aspect. Then only we can like go further with the study. Then like so okay, in chemistry, manufacturing and control information, we have to provide information such as what is the like the structural formula, the composition, then how it has to be manufactured, then how it has to be um, like if large scale manufacturing techniques are available, then that information. So all these has to be included in the chemistry and manufacturing information. Then drug substance. So here we have to include uh, any description of the drug substance, such as physical, chemical, then biological characteristics of the drug substance, then which organization is manufacturing it, name and address of the manufacturer, what is the method of the preparation, then what is the acceptable limits and analytical methods. Um, so for the new chemical entity that we are going to use, like in the limit test and all, I think we have studied in lower classes. What amount, like what's the extent of purity it is available. So all this information has to be present in the regarding like in this part of the IND application. Then there should be sufficient information to support this particular chemical entity is stable. So while doing all the toxicological study, we have to ensure that, like mention that this particular substance was stable. So all such evidences information sufficient to support stability of the drug substance during the toxicological study. So that has to be present. Then so that is the regarding drug substance. Now next, so drug substance, all the physical, chemical, biological characteristics. Then who is the manufacturer, name and address of manufacturer, how it is prepared. Then what are the analytical techniques? For example, like different drug substance would like there are different methods of analysis for different type of drug. It will vary based upon the chemistry of the particular product. So which analytical technique is used, or which limit test is used, or what is the extent of like how pure it should be. All this has to be mentioned in this part. Then next is drug product. So drug product is again the complete product where all we make. We know the new chemical entity as such cannot be used. So we have to add certain additives so that like sufficient, uh, it should have sufficient bulk so that it can be prepared as a tablet or syrup or whatever dosage form, uh, in dosage form that has to be administered in human beings. Like a new chemical entity, we cannot, maybe if the dose is zero point 0.1 microgram. So zero point 0.1 microgram of the new chemical entity we cannot weigh and give to human beings. So we need to add certain bulk forming agents so that in that particular bulk forming agent we'll add it and we'll prepare the particular dosage. So we need to add certain additives and then we'll prepare it as a drug product. So drug product means not just a new chemical entity, it will also contain other inactive compounds. So what all inactive compounds are added? All the additives, which all additives are added, and any techniques. Um, then they have to ensure that these particular additives that are added are not going to interact with the new chemical entity. All such information has to be present. Then manufacturing and packaging procedure, how this drug product is manufactured, and what is the packaging procedure. Then name and address of the drug product manufacturer. Then what like whether the particular product will be stable for the duration of the clinical study. So the a description, like they have to ensure that this particular product has got sufficient stability for the planned clinical study. So all these information has to be present in this part. So drug product is like new chemical entity along with many other additives which will be added so that it can be made into a form that can be consumed by human beings. So these information regarding all the components that is added to prepare the drug product, then composition, which all are added in, and in what quantity it is added. Then name and who is going to manufacture it. Name and uh, name and address of the drug product manufacturer. Then how it is manufactured and how the packaging is done. Then for here also any analytical methods that can be used to assess study this particular product. Then there should be a statement that ensures that the particular product will be stable throughout the study duration. So all these has to be present. Then if any placebo is used in the study, then uh, a brief description of the composition manufacture of the placebo that is used in the study has to be mentioned. Then labeling, so copy of all the labels has to be included in the study. Like what the investigative, the sponsor uh, ensures that the particular drug product is given to the investigator, and when they give it to the investigator, these product will be labeled. So what label they are going to use when the product is being given to the investigator. That copy of label on the labels has to be included in the IND application. Then next is pharmacology and toxicological information. So in pharmacology and toxicological information, again, all the studies done in animals. So when they do the animal study, what all information they collected, what all pharmacological information they collected, and the toxicological information collected by using the drug in laboratory animals or even in vitro. So those details has to be submitted. Then, uh, then here they have to also mention like the person who has done the study, like the qualification of the individual who has done the study, then the qualification of the individual who have evaluated the study, and concluded that this particular, after performing the animal study, preclinical, animal in vitro and in vivo study, the result will be generated, and this generated result will be studied by a certain group of people, and they have, after studying the data, they have to conclude that whether um, this particular chemical entity can be used in human beings or not. So in that their study report has to be included in the IND application, and those people who evaluated the result and made the conclusion, their name and qualification also needs to be mentioned in the IND application. Then in this pharmacology and drug disposition has to be mentioned. Like we know, any new chemical entity will be having some pharmacological effects, and some mechanism they have identified. So that has to be made. That has to be informed. Then what was the action in the animals? Then what is the any information, like the information collected pertaining to absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination in the animals, that has to be included. Then toxicological information. Toxicological information we have learned, like acute, subacute, chronic toxicity, then reproductive toxicity, effect on fetus, then in route of administration, like even if the drug is to be supposed to be used in the eye, then ocular test to be applied on the skin, then dermal or skin sensitization test, then inhalational test. Oh, I think we have discussed. So these information also has to be included in the IND application. Then if some uh, like these tests are done in animals and in vitro. So here the sponsor has to ensure that the particular all these tests were done in accordance with a good laboratory practice (GLP). So there are GLP guidelines, good laboratory practice guidelines set by the regulatory authorities. So the sponsor here has to mention that the drug, the studies, the toxicity studies or the pharmacological test studies that is done in lab animals, uh, in vivo or in vitro, all these were done in accordance with the GLP guideline, good laboratory practice guidelines. So he has to mention that. And if at all some deviation was there, then the sponsor has to explain like why it was deviated, why the study deviated from the GLP practices. So that has to be included in the study. So in pharmacology and toxicology information, uh, we have to uh, submit all the data that was uh, collected after performing the toxicology and pharmacology studies, and the particular who performed it, which team performed it, their name and qualification. Then once the result was generated, it would be given to certain people who will assess the or evaluate the result, and they will conclude whether it can be used in human beings or not. So those people who has done this evaluation, their name and qualification also needs to be submitted. Then in pharmacology and drug disposition, they have to, like what information has to be given, all the ADME, then drug effects, then mechanism has to be submitted. In toxicology, we have to give information regarding acute, subacute, chronic toxicity study result, then reproductive toxicity result, effect on fetus, carcinogenicity, mutagenicity. All those information has to be submitted. Then here the sponsor has to ensure that the all these studies, in vitro and in vivo studies, were done in compliance with the GLP, good laboratory practices set by the regulatory authority. And if at all somewhere, if they have violated or deviated from the good laboratory practice, the sponsor has to give explanation on like why they deviated from the GLP. Then any previous human experience with the investigation drug, if at all it is available, then the sponsor has to submit that also. Any previous information regarding the human, any previous human experience with the new chemical entity is available, then sponsor has to submit that also. Then some additional information such as this additional information depend upon what type of new chemical entity that we are using. So, for example, if the particular new chemical entity is a psychotropic substance, then uh, specific information on such studies on animals has to be submitted. Then, if it is a radioactive substance, then radiation absorbed dose, then their effect, all those has to be submitted. Then uh, any other information which will help in evaluation of the clinical particular IND has to be submitted. So any like additional information such as if the drug new chemical entity has got some psychotropic potential, drug abuse potential, then specific studies should be result of specific studies should be submitted. Then if it is a radioactive drug, I think radioactive drugs we have studied last year in hospital pharmacy, radiopharmaceuticals. So if such substance is used, then the radiation absorbed dose, then uh, how it is calculated, all those information has to be provided. Then any other information which will be helpful in evaluating the uh, IND application, then such information also has to be given. Then when they mention like if the regulatory authority is asking for any review, like any other some more few details if they are asking, then uh, the sponsor has to it is important that the sponsor has to identify each file by any name, reference number or page number. So whenever sponsor is again giving information about these, he has to mention that particular number of the data that is already being submitted. Then if any of the material that is in the IND application is in any other language, then a proper translation has to be given. Then the sponsor has to submit uh, three copies, one original along with two copies has to be submitted. Then all these are other informations such as if any information of any previously submitted uh, document is there, the sponsor has to use the particular reference number that is given. Then if at all something is in some other language, then proper translation has to be done. Then he has to submit one original and two copies to the regulatory authority. So these are some of the like information, content and format of IND application. So it should contain a cover sheet. Then cover sheet should contain contact details, then commitments, CRO details, monitor details, then table of content, then the investigator's brochure. Investigator's brochure is a document that is submitted to the investigator. So, like what all information are there in the investigator's brochure also we discussed. Then protocol, individual protocol for phase 1, then protocol for phase 2, phase 3, all these has to be submitted. Then few details of what are the content of the protocol also we discussed. Then chemistry, manufacturing and control information. So we discussed like in a drug substance, what all about regarding drug substance, what all information has to be given. And also we discussed on drug product, what all information has to be given. Then labeling information. Then the other pharmacology and toxicology information. Then previous human experience, if any information is available in maybe in some other country where this particular new chemical entity was used in human beings, and such information is available, that also has to be submitted. Then any other additional information, like if it is the radiopharmaceuticals, or if the particular drug has got psychotropic effect, then that also has to be covered. Then then translation requirement, number of copies, all those things we discussed. So this is the content and format of IND application. That's all. I know this particular subject is little bit very like boring, but please bear and study properly. Thank you.